Hi class, this is week 3. We've talked about requirements modeling. We've talked about process modeling. This week we're going to talk about domain modeling. So requirements are those features of the system. We talked about functional and non-functional. Processes are the steps that are required by the system and different entities or actors to deliver those features. The two models that you've created so far are your use case diagram and activity diagram. Today we're going to talk about domain modeling, and the related model is your domain model class diagram. That's what your lab exercise is on. This is the outcome of our domain modeling process. This is what we call a domain model class diagram. Those boxes that you see, we call them classes. Those are categories of things that our system needs to keep track of. So if I'm Uber, I need to keep track of my drivers and the cars in the system. So drivers will be a box and the car will be another box. Those lines are association among different classes. So a driver drives a car. That's a line between the driver class and the car class. Now those numbers are what we call multiplicity constraints. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But we have our classes. Those are categories of things that our system needs to remember or know about. The lines are those naturally occurring associations that we care to remember. So there are so many associations among things in the world, some of which our system cares about, some of which probably are outside the scope of our system. So you have to keep that in mind when you add or remove lines. Make sure you include those that are related to your area that you're focusing on. These are some examples for banking. We have employee, customers, loan application, loan and account. For Uber, we just talked about you have your drivers, cars, trip account, area of operation, payment method. This is Calico. This is a science company, and there is another example that we talk about. Colonist, health profile, technician, supply material, equipment, air conditioning, radiation condition, and any other thing that you have come up with. So that's our area of focus. Keep in mind that things are of different types. Some of them are tangible things, like airplanes, like book, like vehicles. Some of them are roles. You have managers. You need to know who your managers are. So you're creating a class for managers, and you have a list of attributes that will help you describe your managers and keep track of them. Some of them are organizational units, some of them are devices. We have so many of them in the Space Colony Information System. Some of them are sites or locations. Some of them are incidents or events. Those are important too. These categories are not exhaustive. They don't cover all the things that you can come up with, but this is a really good start, and we use two techniques to come up with things in our domain model. The first one is brainstorming. When you brainstorm with your users, ask them, okay, this is the system. What kind of information do you want to save? And that's when you can get into things or classes that your system needs to model and keep track of eventually. The other technique is noun technique. You look at all the documents that you have created, all the documents that your stakeholders have given you. You look at all the user logs from previous systems. You look at the current comparable systems on the market, and you take all the nouns. Those nouns are candidates for becoming classes in your domain model class diagram. Not all of them will become classes. There is a refinement process we go through, but those are all candidates, like a driver, like an account. Those are nouns in the system. one thing I want to remind you, some of you have taken your database classes or worked with your database projects in the internship programs you've been in, or perhaps you are currently working on databases. These are things that eventually go into your database. So domain modeling is about storing data, but before storing data, we're going to have a good model. Make sure we cover everything that we store, and then in design phase, we're going to take these things and design a database to keep them in. I asked you to look at some of the examples, and these are some of the examples that I usually discuss in class. I want you to look at the drone racing league and come up with some of the things that you think DRL needs to keep track of. Over the years, we've compiled a list, and I'll show you the list after you have taken a look at the videos. The refinement process will help you decide which one of those nouns that you have come up with after brainstorming or applying the noun technique you can include in your domain model. So you want to make sure those nouns are unique things or in your scope that your system needs to keep track of. You want to make sure they are within the scope. You want to make sure there are more than one of them. So if you only have one manager and that one manager will be there forever, probably you don't need a class for manager. Things that you may want to exclude are things that are synonyms of other things. So some people call them employees, some people call them staff. These are two different nouns on your list, and then you can say that there was only one that's needed. You want to make sure these are not output of other things that are already in your domain model, or not input to other things that are already included in your model. Some of the items you may need to research. Make sure you talk to your stakeholders and ask them, is this something that you keep in your system, or is it something that you get a report of from another system, probably from your suppliers' information systems or from your shipment company? Do you really keep them in your databases? Do you want to have them? Or you can just get them from other related systems or entities. So these are some of the items that we have come up with over the years, and the list is usually longer than this, but I wanted to have a good representation of the three categories: include, exclude, and research. I want you to look at DRL, look at some of the videos they have, and come up with a list. Just write down, and then go through the refinement process. If you wanted to talk back to me about your list, I would be really excited to see them. Next is attributes and values. After you came up with a list of things that your system needs to keep track of, those will become your classes. You give them a name, and then you need to come up with a list of attributes that will help you describe instances of those classes. So I have a driver class. How do I describe a specific driver? By their license number, by their ID in your system. This is an ID that you have given them in Uber. By their history, what is the first date they joined Uber, and so on. So these are the attributes that will help you specify instances of that big category of things that you have. And this is an example here for an employee or a customer with an ID, first name, last name, home phone, and work phone. One thing that we don't talk about here, but we'll talk again about in design phase, is that every class will like to have excuse me, a unique identifier. So an attribute that is unique for the specific instances of that class. So if you think about yourself as a citizen, that's your social security number. It's for you, only for you. If someone has your social security number, they can find you, and you're only one. There is only one of you. If you're a student, that's your university ID number. If you are a customer, here is the customer ID. If you're in Uber, that's your driver license number or an Uber ID. So we don't talk about that a lot here in this analysis phase, but we'll revisit that again. I think that's something you can keep in mind, specifically if you've seen databases before. That idea seems more familiar. Next thing you want to talk about is your associations, those relationships that you want to model. So if you're a gym and you're working with individuals, probably you don't care a lot about their marital status, unless you want to offer them a discount for the family. But it doesn't matter to your system if they are in a relationship or not in a relationship. Is it a marriage relationship or so on? So some relationships are outside the scope of your system. You don't need to model them. Keep that in mind when you add lines, when you add associations. Make sure they're related to the space colony information systems. So this is an order that's placed by a worker who works in the accounting department and contains 2-item the order. So the order is placed by an employee. Employee works in a department, and the order contains items. So order to employee, employee to department, and order to items. I'm going to come back with more information about associations. Make sure you watch DRL videos and compile a list and go through the refinement process. This is a fun activity. We usually do that in face-to-face, and students are usually very excited about knowing more about drones and the race and the kind of events that happen over the year. Thank you, and I'll be back.